Hey, welcome back. My name is Antoine Johnson, your host, Releasing Pressure podcast. Glad to be back with you guys. And as always, I'd like to start off with a verse. And my verse from today comes from Proverbs 18 that says, "A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before the great." A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before the great. And then the scripture or the verse, the quote, the quote for today is, "Strive not to be a success, but rather be of value." You know, one of the things that I love about both of those things is that so many times in our society, like we're constantly on this pursuit of success, right? Like whether it's money, fame, notoriety, you name it. And especially for our young people, I had an opportunity to go to this basketball kind of camp a week ago, and we started having conversations around, well, what do you want to do when you get older? What do you that kind of thing. And the young people said one thing over another, and this, that, and the third. And as I was leaving that place, I started thinking about that, right? Like some of the motivations around being a success, or even what success means to them. In the proverb, "A man's gift will make room for him and bring him among the great." I think a lot of it has to do with the way in which we're created and been, right? Like our gifts, the value that we bring. And so oftentimes we don't think about the value, the things that we're gifted at doing in terms of what will make us a success, rather the things that we're seeing on social media, this and that. And I even think about that as it relates to our kids, right? And our kids need our guidance as fathers, as parents, to help them to understand what their bent is, what their gifts are, the value that they bring, the things that they're good at, so that their gifts are able to make room for them, and they're not trying to pursue to be someone else that they're not, or doing things that they're not necessarily gifted at, but rather just something that they see that it looks cool, right? And there's nothing wrong with having hobbies or things of that nature, but to set out to make a career out of something simply because it's attractive to others, but not something that our kids are called to, is not of service to them, right? Like it doesn't serve them well. And so I think as parents, not only do we have to pursue the gifts and the things that we have, right, so that we are able to add value, right, like that value that we bring to the marketplace, but we have to model and guide our young people, our children, on one, cultivating their gifts, understanding what those things are, so that they're able to bring that value to the marketplace, that their gifts would make room for them and bring them among the great. You know, I as I was on my way here, I was thinking about, just things that have been impacting my life, and even the theme, right? Releasing pressure. I think so often as fathers, we have so many pressures. First of all, right? Parents, people in general, there's always these competing priorities. And today, I'm in August. By the time this airs, will be late September or so. But anyways, yesterday was my son's birthday. He just turned 2, Nathan. And today we're celebrating his birthday party. But a couple months ago, I had an opportunity with my new job that I started to go on a work trip, right? Training. And man, I wanted to go, right? Like they were going to Houston. And I'm like, man, I've never been there. I want to go. And almost immediately in the back of my mind, I'm like, no, let me slow down, right? Like before I made that commitment with my supervisor, I'm like, let me talk to my wife first about it, right? Because I know it's around the time of my son's birthday. I don't want those problems. I don't want those problems at home. And then as I began to think about it after I got off the phone, or after our call, I'm like, no, let me not even ask her, right? Or not ask her, let me not even bring this up. And I didn't bring it up because I knew she was going to be ticked about it. Like I knew as soon as I said, hey, I'm going to, plan this training trip that I really don't have to go on at work. It's just a development opportunity to be able to go add value and support other folks, train other folks. She was like, do you really have to do it? Like, it would just create a lot of pressure and tension in my household. And so the point I'm making is that sometimes we cause we cause undue pressure on ourselves. And so even as, I talk about releasing pressure for fathers, men, especially when, we have the young little people in the house, because there's just so many things going on. We have to make decisions that are inclusive of our entire family and not just those things that we desire to do, right? And my way of releasing pressure in that season of my life just a couple months ago was deciding not to do something that I knew was going to create tension and some degrees of turmoil in my house. Like I knew, and furthermore, like I wanted to be there to celebrate my son's birthday. This is his second birthday. Wanted to be there to celebrate that. I think it was so easy for me to initially be like, this is just a second birthday. Like it won't, doesn't mean a whole lot, right? I mean, he'll have many more birthdays, right? But again, one, I wanted to be there. Two, like I didn't need that. I didn't need that tension, that pressure in the house for making a decision that only had me in mind. And I think, that's one of the things that I have to learn to grow in. So often I could be so selfish. And I'm sure some of you out there resonate with that, right? That we get in these modes, especially for guys and ladies too. But, we get in these modes of, being so driven by work and success and doing more and all these other things. And we lose sight of how it affects and impacts other areas of our lives. And so just taking the pressure off ourselves means that we consider how the ripple effect of the decisions that we're making, and not just making decisions that suit us or that are most advantageous for us. And so, man, yeah, that really just hit me on my way here. I thank God for it. But yeah, it just means so much as we think about this topic of creating pressure, of releasing pressure, rather. One of the other things that recently happened is we were in the middle of purchasing a home, right? So that's been creating a lot of pressure in our houses, a lot of moving parts with those kind of things. And we recently started talking about how we're going to manage the kids in that process. And my wife is like, what are we going to do? We're going to have in-laws watching. Like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, we're just going to trade off each other, right? Like if I need to like stay back with them and you need to go, or, whatever it takes, like we try to, work together to make things happen and not be as much of a burden or have to ask other folks to do things. So yeah, a lot going on there. By the time this airs, we should be getting settled there. Should be getting settled into that process. Let's see. One of the other things that came up for me the other day, I was listening to this podcast, and in the podcast, the gentleman was talking about how to really guide and disciple our children when there is chaos, and in the midst of chaos, and just like little kids being little kids, right? I got a 1 and a 4-year-old, now 2 and a 4-year-old. And like I know what that feels like, right? Like more often than not, like the kids are running through the house, screaming, doing all this, and my head feel like it's about to explode because I have said something for the 5th time for them to stop doing one thing over another. But as I was listening to this podcast, gentleman's talking about how the way that we act or respond to situations or circumstances in our lives speak a lot more about us as parents than it does our children. Another way to say that is like my response to my children has a lot more to do with what's going on in my heart than it does and with my children are doing. And so one of the things that the gentleman mentioned was that like there's always going to be chaos, right? Like in these early years, there's always like the houses, the kids are screaming, they're doing this, they're doing that, and that doesn't happen every second of the day, but it's happening more often than not these days. And one of the things that I'm having to realize is that my disposition, the way in which I'm expressing my frustrations or the lack thereof to my children is got a lot more to do with like my ability to self-regulate and manage myself than it does them. And so I'm trying to learn how to manage those things. And one of the things that he mentioned is, taking a step back and really evaluating the situation and also praying, right? Like I did that the other day. My wife had to go out to help a couple at our church who's moving. And she's like, I'm gonna be out, from about 5 to 8 o'clock, she was gone for around that time. And I'm like, all right, cool. I just got off work. I'm like, man, what am I gonna do with the kids? Like, what are we gonna do today? And usually during those days, I like to get them out the house. But before we did that, like we were in the house and I found myself feeling overwhelmed and a little anxious. And so like I practiced that where like at one point, like I just like pause and I prayed for a minute. And I realized that the Lord's grace was able to help me to change my attitude in that moment. Now, I'm going to be honest with you and say I don't do that all the time, right? Like that happened the other day and there's been some other frustrations and I haven't done that. But the practice of that showed me that even in the mundane and simple things of life, like when we're feeling overwhelmed and frustrated, that there is a grace for us if we're able to yield to our emotions when it comes to rearing our children or talking to them and or trying to reroute their decision making, right? And so I got the kids outside and we hung out. I had my music going in my car, like the kids we're playing ball and doing stuff like that. So it turned out to be a really good night. And by the time we got back in the house, I bathed them and put them to bed. But again, my point is just taking a step back sometime and realizing like, okay, yeah, they spilled that milk over there, but I don't have to blow up, right? Like inwardly processing our thoughts and praying. And for those of you who are not, faith-based or you don't subscribe to any particular faith or religion, like just take a step back and really think about the severity of what happened before you react. And again, I say that not as someone that is doing it perfectly, but as someone who's trying, right? Like I'm trying not to explode and walk in anger in every situation and circumstance. In fact, one of the verses that has been resonating with me lately is one that says, anger rests in the bosom of a fool, right? Like, from the book of Proverbs, and it just makes me think like, man, like when I'm able to not express my anger right away and just pull back, like it keeps me from doing foolish things. It keeps my children from feeling afraid of me or what I might do to them, what I might say to them, whatever, and so forth, right? Like, so it's just a better way of doing life, right? Especially when I think about the longevity of my parenting and when my kids get older, what I want them to think and say about their experience of me in the household, right? Like in my presence at home, was my presence one that made them feel anxious? Did my presence make them feel like they were safe and that things were going to be okay, right? Like our very presence in the house, apart from anything that we say, like how do our children feel around us? And I don't want them to feel anxious or fearful or like things are unpredictable and they don't know what they're going to get from me from one moment to the next. And so I say that as not someone who has mastered it, but as someone who is walking through this journey with you guys, but also realizing that I want to get better, right? We can get better as people, as men and fathers. We can continue to grow. Recently, I was sitting down at my desk the other night and I was doing some work. But before I got into things, I felt led to pull up the scripture. Matter of fact, I lied because my note says that I made this at 7:10 in the morning, 7:19 a.m. So, anyways, I'm going through scriptures and I'm reading the book of Matthew, and in this particular verse, Matthew 9:17, and the New Living Translation, it says, "And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the old wineskins will burst from the pressure, spilling the new wine, ruining the skins. New wine is stored in new wineskins, so both are preserved." And as I thought about that, like I really think the Lord just brought this to my mind, and just thinking about life, right? Like thinking about life, and I thought about one of the reasons why we have to release the pressure in our lives, and I talked about in the last segment how my decision making, right? Like the decision making not to go on a work training piece versus staying home with my son just automatically took pressure off the table. My wife was thankful that I didn't try to make that decision or manipulate her in thinking that I had to do something that I didn't, that took pressure off. But one of the reasons why we have to release the pressure in our lives is because we're constantly being called to a higher standard, right? We're constantly being called to a higher standard. And in order to rise to the occasion of the standard, we can't bring old habits and mindsets into this new season of our lives. Just like old wine can't be put into, or new wine can't be put into old wineskins because it'll burst. If we step into a new season of our lives with the same habits, with the same mindset, it won't work. Right, like the old habits and mindsets will not bear the fruit that we need to bear in this new season of our lives. Whether it's you're having a new baby, you're about to start a new job, maybe you're dating, right? Like maybe you're seriously dating because you're looking to be married, and you're like, listen, I want to have a healthy relationship this time. Like I'm tired of the toxic relationships that I've had in the past. I want something better. And so in order to have better in this new season of life, we have to change our mindset and habits around the things that we're doing, right? Like the fresh and the freshness of the new season of our lives, right? Like we have to be willing to change our mindset and our habits. One of the things that I've recently been doing is becoming more intentional about reading, right? Like every day reading for at least 30 minutes. And before Simone and I had our daughter Isabella, like I was an avid reader, read a lot. Like I had a lot more time on my hands. But that's what I did for my own personal development. And then shortly after we had her, like I fell off. Still had my books, right? One of my most prized possessions, but I wasn't reading like that. And recently, I got to get back on that. I got to get back on that. And I also have to get more serious about my prayer life. I have to get more serious about the commitments that I'm making, what to say yes to, what to say no to, because this new season that I'm walking into requires for me to change some of my habits, change some of my mindset so that the new wine that I'm bringing in won't burst from my habits, right? Like, so that my old habits, the wineskin, won't burst because of the new season, the wine that is being poured into. That makes sense. So, yeah, just appreciate you guys for tuning in. I ask that you like, subscribe, and comment. Comment if something that I said resonated with you. Comment. I want to hear what your thoughts are. So until next time.